Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. We are finally doing an animal communication video. I haven't made one in ages, even though I've had a animal communication course come out since. Anyways, I'm going to be answering a question that one of you gave to me on Patreon, and one of you asked me if there are some animals that are easier to communicate with than others. And that is a fantastic question, and I'm going to answer that today. Now, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lauren. I'm also a psychic medium and a psychic development coach. Like, I teach a lot of people here on this channel how to strengthen their abilities. I have several courses on that, but I'm also an animal communicator, and I've actually started, I would say I kind of started there first. That's what drew me into this whole entire world, was wanting to communicate with my pets. And I would say animal communication, I don't want to say it comes easiest to me, but it in a lot of ways does, because I've been doing it for so long, just naturally as a child. So hopping back into it just feels so much easier than, you know, communicating with the spirit, which I didn't do for as long. However, back to this question. Are some animals easier to communicate with than others? And this is such a fantastic question. I get it honestly a lot. And I love answering it because the short answer is yes. But there's actually several reasons why animals are harder to communicate with than not. And the first reason why is that some animals are just naturally more able to telepathically connect with humans, mostly because they've done it more. So people, energetically communicate with them, maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly. But sometimes you can just get this sense of oh, they've communicated telepathically, energetically between them and their owner. And so it's they're pretty used to it, I should say. Whereas other times you'll find some pets are totally not used to it. They are, maybe nobody has ever reached out to them energetically in their life. And I know that because that feeling is almost like, whoa, where did you come from? It's like suddenly I'm a voice in their head and they're just like, whoa, who are you? I want to say a lot of wild animals are this way, especially if they're not usually in contact with humans, but not all, that's not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes you'll go to the zoo and this will happen as well. There might be some animals that, nobody ever communicates with them in that way. But there are some that absolutely have really good relationships with their caretakers. Another reason why some are easier to communicate with is just they're naturally better at doing it. They're better communicators. They express what they need and they want better. And we're talking about all energetic communication here. Obviously some animals will be yeah, give me that, bark, bark, and that's not quite what we're talking about. We're talking about more of that, you're going back and forth using your clairs to say, hey, what do you want? Hey, what do you need? But some animals are just naturally better at expressing themselves, just like people. There's, probably some people that get tongue-tied, get caught up on their words a lot, and maybe are not the best at expressing what they want or need. And I would say that's the exact same for animals. They're unique, they have different personalities. It can happen for them too. Another very interesting reason of why they can be different to communicate with is because some of them use different clairs. And I've found this over many years of reading, and it's almost I don't want to say it as a general, but it's interesting to see how much more often animals will use clairvoyance and clairsentience. They'll just send images and thoughts. I'm very clairaudient. That's my strongest clair. I hear things. And so when I communicate with animals, a lot of times I only get the pictures and I only get the feelings. And I think that's how they're used to communicating with each other. Again, not a hard and fast rule. It could just be my individual experience. Not every time somebody sends you a psychic hit are you receiving it the exact same way. So I could send you a clairvoyant hit or a clairvoyant image, but you could hear it. Just because one person sends it with one clair doesn't mean that you can't pick it up with a different one. But I think the majority of the time it tends to be pretty similar. If I'm sending an image, I pick up an image. If I'm sending a thought, I receive a thought. And so that's why animals, I feel they tend to be more clairvoyant and more clairsentient, because they're used to speaking not with words, but with images and feelings. Again, that's not always the case. At the end of this video, I'm gonna go through each one of my pets and kind of just tell you them as an example, but that's just what I kind of notice. Another reason why they can be harder to communicate with is because they're more stubborn. Sometimes they just don't want to communicate. Maybe they're mad at their owner, or maybe they're mad that they're bringing in some random person to talk to them, or maybe they're too busy. They've got other things to do. You know what I mean? Whereas some are just dying to talk to us and they're ready to go and they've got a list that they want to talk about. But often I find if they're harder to communicate with, there might be a trust issue there. There might be a trust issue between them and other people, and that could be like previous trauma. Like any animal that's been like abused, I have a harder time communicating with, because they're like, who's this person? Like, I don't know who this is. I don't trust you. You have to earn that trust. And in my animal communication course, I kind of talk about how you can do that in the middle of a reading if you find that they aren't like opening up to you. But yeah, they can be a little bit more stubborn or just totally willing to communicate. And that's not something that you can force on them at all. Like, you can't force that communication if they do not want to talk to you. Another reason why animals might be harder to communicate with, or just like between animal to animal, is it actually could be on you as the psychic. Like, you could just be having a harder day. You could be not connecting as well for whatever reason. Like, we've talked about this in several of my videos. There's reasons why you could be wrong, and it's not always the animal's fault. So those are several reasons why, you know, one animal might be more able to communicate versus another. And you guys probably have your own pets and you can probably feel that difference. And I will talk about my pets now just to kind of give you an idea. My cats are now 11. My dog is now 7. They're kind of getting up there in their years. I've been with them for a very long time, and so I know how we communicate. So hopefully this helps just give you some examples of how it's even different within my family. Now, Mufasa is our golden cat. He is our first cat, my first cat ever, after moving out from like my parents. He's got such an attitude. He's the king of the house, like literally, and almost every time any animal communicator talks to him, he shows them an image of a crown on top of his head. He will do that. Now, Mufasa, I would say, is the most intuitive, and I think that's because I think him and I just have a strong connection, and he is mostly claircognizant, or I get mostly claircognizant hits from him, as well as clairaudience. So I hear things and I just know a lot of times, but I hear like sentences from him. I will hear full-on sentences. The reason why I think he might be a little bit more communicative is, one, because of me. And you know, that's something I forgot to mention, is that if you are an intuitive person, well, I guess I sort of mentioned it. If you're communicating with them intuitively frequently, then you are going to have that connection, and that's going to be established as a way that you communicate. And in my beginning courses, you know, I was constantly communicating with Mufasa. I think ever since then, we've had a clear intuitive connection. I feel like I hear his thoughts almost all the time, and I just kind of like, it's not even like, wow, oh my gosh, wow, cool anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, Mufasa said that, you know? I also suspect that he's like an older soul, or maybe he's been around a few more times. I've never asked him, I probably should. But I think because of that, he's even telling me right now, like, he's like, well, it's because I've been a human a few times. And I'm like, okay. And I can communicate with him right now all the way from home. Like, he came in just like that. But he's always starting a conversation. Like, I will hear him pop into my head when I'm not even like thinking about talking to him. I very often hear very sarcastic inputs from him. Like, anytime my husband and I are talking about the dog, maybe the dog did something bad. He's like, well, you should just get rid of him. I'm like, he really doesn't like our dog, Ash. And that was something an animal communicator told me. She said, hey, if you decide to get a dog, don't get another male because they're gonna butt heads. She was totally right. So let me go to my dog next. My dog is the youngest of our 3. He's interesting. He is a lot harder for me to communicate with, and I feel like he's just stubborn. I feel like he doesn't always want to communicate. I feel like he has a better relationship with my husband than me. I feel like he holds grudges against me, but I don't know. I don't know if I just read him wrong or if that's really the case. But in general, he tends to be more physical with his communication. Like, he will point with his nose at the things he wants. And that's because we trained him as a puppy to do that. We trained him, if he needs to go out to go pee, he needs to touch the doorknob. And he just adopted that with anything that he wants. Anything he wants, he uses his nose. And he's like, open the door to give me food. Open this door to let me out. I'm gonna poke my nose up at the cat food because I want the cat food. But he is so much more like a human because he will like huff. And maybe it's just a husky thing. He will literally be like, one story I will always remember is that we wake up at a certain time. We're usually, my dog's inside and he knows what time we wake up, but I had to wake up really early for something. I can't remember what it was, but it was still dark out. And he got off the couch, he looked at me, he walked over to the window or like outside door, looked out the outside door, poked his head around, like, look, it's dark outside, looked back at me and just went, and then he walked back and resumed his sleeping position. Like, he's so physical with how he communicates. And I don't think that that's wrong or like he's less intuitive that way. I think he's just developed a certain way to communicate with us that's different than other animals. He also barks a lot. Like if he wants to come inside, he barks. I mean, maybe that's just like a dog thing and how we end up training dogs differently than cats. I'm not sure. But I will say I often get him wrong. Like there's some times where I think that he's totally saying one thing, like get off of me, leave me alone. And then my husband is like, no, he wants belly rubs. See? And then he rubs his belly. My dog's like, ah, I love it. And I often get disappointed at how often I get him wrong. But I think there's a whole nother like thing of, reading your own pets and how you can misjudge them a lot, which I also talk about in my course. Now, Sarabi is our second cat, and she has been a very interesting one to communicate, especially recently because she's been diagnosed with diabetes. And it's been an on and off struggle. I've actually made a podcast on it if you're like really curious to know. She communicates in kind of like, I feel like she's way louder, short bursts, and I hear her more clairaudiently. And so I hear these loud, clear phrases, usually when she wants something, and she doesn't really want a whole lot. She's a pretty like easygoing cat. She just wants her food. She's usually always willing to talk, but she doesn't always start that conversation like Mufasa does. I think Mufasa is just more of a pushy personality. I think Sarabi, though, I just feel like she doesn't want to bother people as much, and so she really only asks for things when she wants it. But I think that's also on me for not starting a conversation with her as much. She doesn't expect it as much. And that has since changed again since she's been diagnosed, because I've been having to help her and manage her, and I've been trying to communicate with her and ask her, like, what do you need? Like, do you want us to change this? Do you want us to try that? Do you not? That's a whole nother like topic to open of dealing with like losing a pet and trying to communicate with it. There's just a lot of emotions there, and so it can be more difficult. And I will say that like when we were taking her to the vet, like the first time that we already knew she had diabetes, but she was not eating, not drinking. She got deathly skinny. She hadn't like gone to the bathroom at all for days. She was laying in the same corner of the house, like all these signs saying, okay, she's probably like going to die soon. And she ended up just being constipated, which is like kind of funny, but also not, because it sucks. But in the moments where it was hardest for her and when we had to take her to the vet, she hates that. And like there was one time she looked me dead in the eyes and she was just like, just let me go. And I was like, don't say that. This is heartbreaking. No. And the reason why I bring this up is that's another reason why it might be harder to communicate with animals, is sometimes they say things we don't want to hear. And if we don't listen to them, then they're going to stop communicating with us. And so, yes, I didn't listen to her in that situation. I tried as best as I can to not let her go and to try everything I could to help her first, which has proven just fine. She's on new food. She's not constipated. We're managing her diabetes okay for now. But yeah, there's a lot of situations where people might actually be getting things from their pets, or a psychic might say, hey, your pet says this. and they're like, I don't want to hear that, I don't like that, I don't want to, do that or, help them in any way. And so yeah, they're not going to keep communicating or trusting people if, what they say is just not listened to. So yeah, I hope going over my pets has kind of helped you get a sense of like, hey, everyone is different. Everyone has unique personalities. Even within my 3 little pets in my house, they are all across the board. And just like humans, they have different personalities. They have different ways that they think and different ways that they like to communicate. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. I'm really curious to see if you think your pets are kind of like same or different. Let me know in the comments down below. And let me know if you have any more questions about animal communication. I need more animal communication on my channel. So if there's anything you're curious about after listening to this video, please let me know. And just remember too, I have a Patreon, and that's kind of where this video idea came about, is somebody on Patreon asked me. So we have Q&A videos like once a month, so you guys can ask me questions. I respond to you guys in a video. So there's all sorts of bonus content through my Patreon, early access to these videos, you got extra readings. So I hope to see you over there, but thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.